So let's start here with what questions, Bible-related questions. Last time we were together, we did the book of Judges. Just so happy. What was hilarious was to see this long line of people waiting for coffee, including like some seventh graders. It's like, dude, you need to get out of the way because there is a pastor 5 people behind you in the coffee line who's going to eat you if you stay between him and his coffee. Stephen and I are like, we made coffee in the dorm. I'm standing there sipping coffee, watching the people in the coffee line going, yeah, mine's better anyway. But so anyway, so questions, Bible-related questions, anything from your Bible reading, anything going on, Kenneth?
My grandmother asked me a question. She said, did you know there's a riddle in the Bible?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't know anything about it. And then she went on to explain how Samson killed a lion. And that later on, he went by that thing, and the bees and them built a honey hive in that thing. And he reached in there and got that honey, and he ate it. He gave his mom and daddy something too. I said, what's that got to do with the riddle, Mom? Mom? And she said, he made a riddle, and he said, he told those folks that if they could figure out his riddle, he'd buy them a bunch of clothes. I don't know what that's all about. But anyhow, the riddle was, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong something sweet. And she said, what does that mean? She hadn't told me the whole story.
Yes, to say, once you know the whole story, it's like, oh,
I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And then she explained the story, you know. She said, he got that honey out of the lion that he killed with his bare hands. You know? I said, boy, he wasn't nobody to mess around with, was he?
No.
And she said, no, he was a very strong man, but he didn't follow God right.
Right.
And, I just wondered if everybody knew about the riddle in the Bible.
So, yeah, it was common actually in, it was a wedding. It's related to when Samson marries the first, and it was especially with him coming from Israel, and he's marrying a Philistine girl, and so it's almost but it wasn't uncommon to do riddles or that type of thing as tests or feats of strength, and to challenge each other with that type of thing, for him to show that he was important enough and worthwhile to be accepted into their society. But they knew not to challenge him when it came to strength, because they'd seen him put the whooping on various things. I mean, so they went with the riddles, and they couldn't figure it out because it was, it's kind of like asking, well, what has he got in his pocket? Well, how do you got no clue? So they didn't really have a good clue on that. So they went and they pestered his wife to be and said, if you don't give us the answer, we're going to burn your house down. And she said, well, he hadn't told me the answer. And so she went and got the answer out of him, and he gave the answer to the Philistines. And his response after, when they give him, the answer they give him is, what is stronger than a lion, what's sweeter than honey? Yeah. And he says, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have solved the riddle. It's like, you got the answer from my woman. And so what he does is then he goes down, and his bet was, if you guys get this, I'll give every one of you a new set of clothes. And so what he does is he goes down to the next Philistine town and kills 30 guys, takes their clothes, and gives it to the Philistines. Gives it to the guys that beat him in the riddle contest. So there's some lessons here. First of all, don't get involved in a riddle contest. It almost never turns out well. And second, the other part that gets reinforced with that, Samson was supposed to be what from birth?
He was dedicated to God.
Nazarite. He was dedicated to God. He was a Nazarite. He was a Nazarite. What are the 3 aspects of the Nazarite vow? Don't cut your hair.
Can't drink anything.
Don't touch anything grape.
Yeah.
Not only don't drink wine, but no grape, nothing.
Yeah.
No wine, no raisin bran, no grape nuts, nothing. No grape.
No dead bodies.
And no touching dead things. because that brought ritual corruption and uncleanness. And not only does he violate the Nazirite vow by sticking his hand in there, but then he goes and feeds some of that honey to his parents. It doesn't say, well, this came out of the dead carcass of a lion, and so they don't even realize it, but he's made them unclean in the eyes of God by doing that. So yeah, strong man, bad when it came to what he was supposed to be following God. He just did not, he didn't hit that one well. So. But yes, that's the riddle in the Bible. Out of the eater something sweet. Out of the strong came something to eat. Out of the eater, or out of the eater something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet, and it's the lion and the honey. And then later he also puts the hurting on the Philistines by using the jawbone of a dead donkey as his weapon. So.
He killed several thousand.
Yeah, he's just Samson's an interesting character, but the movie of his life definitely turns out rated R. It's violent, it's bloody, this guy gets killed, that guy gets killed, these people get their house burned down with them in it. I mean, it's not pleasant. So.
Let's go to Genesis.
Okay.
Jacob was headed home to see Esau with all his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrestled with an angel.
Mm-hmm.
What was that all about?
Okay, so this is Jacob. He's on his way to, he's on his way and he's divided his people out.
Right.
He sent the least favorite slave wife, then the next least favorite slave wife, then the least favorite wife, and then the favorite wife. And all of them are between him and Esau, and he's afraid Esau's going to put the whooping on him. So what he's basically done is put his wives and kids between him and Esau, so that Esau will have to, whoop everybody on the way to it. It's really not what you should have done, but he stays behind. And all through the night, he wrestles with an angel. And wrestles, and then in the morning, as the sun's coming up, the angel's like, hey, I'm going to get out of here. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. And then the angel pronounces a blessing on him and touches him on the hip and basically dislocates his hip. And Jacob hobbles around for the rest of his life with that reminder of that wrestling. But you do look at it, Mike, and you ask that question. What is happening here?
Yeah, what's it about?
So there's a couple of thoughts. The first thought, and realize that it's almost always, whenever you hit a spot in the Old Testament, that folks go, wait, what's happening here?
There's a ladder involved in it.
The ladder was a different situation where it's watching angels going up and down.
Okay.
So Stairway to Heaven is a different spot. But because depending on how you translate it, some translations make it ladder and some make it stairway. And thus it is what inspires Led Zeppelin in terms of Stairway to Heaven. But the first response that some people give you with any part of the Old Testament, any Old Testament story, they go, I don't understand that, is, well, it must be symbolic. So what does it symbolize? Well, I don't know, but it must be symbolic. But we don't really know exactly what it symbolizes or what it means. But first of all, I think we should take it as it really happened. And second, what does it mean? There's a couple of possibilities. One, he's wrestling with a good angel, and God is testing him to see if he, to test his tenacity and that type of thing, and to put him in this spot to make him realize, Jacob, you're not smart enough or strong enough to win on your own. The other view is that he's wrestling with a bad angel who's trying to do him in before he even gets, because, hey, let's undo the promise of God. We can wipe out Jacob, and, then his wives and kids are all on their own. And Jacob is wrestling and holding his own and holds on till daylight. But we don't really know because the text is just not all that clear. I mean, it tells us the facts of what happened. Jacob wrestled with an angel. It's Genesis 32, starts with verse 24. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat him, he struck Jacob's hip socket as they wrestled and dislocated his hip. Then he said to Jacob, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me," which tells me that it's not he's not wrestling with the bad guys. Because why would you ask the bad guys for a blessing? Right? But that is an opinion that's out there. "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. "Your name will no longer be Jacob," he said. "It will be Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. Jacob then named the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, he said, yet my life has been spared. The sun shone on him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. That is why, still today, the Israelites don't eat the thigh muscle that is at the hip socket, because he struck Jacob's hip socket at the thigh muscle.
Well, Jacob thought he was God.
Jacob thinks that he's wrestling with God. Now, it would be normal for somebody in the time of Jacob, if they wrestled with an angel sent by God, to count that as wrestling with God. In the same way that we would say, well, I've been reading some World War II history, and you've got, my mind just went completely blank. Patton, you've got General Patton is fighting General Rommel in North Africa. And we would say that Patton, Patton beat Rommel, except that, it's not like Patton and Rommel got out there with a circle of everybody around them and, fought it out. They're the people that worked for them did. And in the same way, Patton's troops would say, "We beat Rommel," even though who they beat was the guy across the sand from them. So it wouldn't be unheard of for Jacob to have wrestled one of God's messengers and count that as wrestling with God, especially to count that as wrestling with a representative of a divine being, an angelic being, because it's something bigger than a man, as far as stronger. So Jacob probably has wrestled with the angel all through the night, and we don't get any more detail with that, because there's two main points. The first point is why the Israelites don't eat a certain part of the meat. Now, why they make the connection from Jacob got hit here, and so therefore, and he limped here, and so therefore when we eat the sheep, we don't eat that part of the sheep, because you'd think it'd be like, well, okay, we wouldn't eat that if we ate a person.
Yeah.
But the people of Israel aren't supposed to eat people anyway. Yesterday's the anniversary of the Donner Party leaving from California. So anyway, that's but it explains that dietary habit, and there are various places in Scripture where you get those explanations. But the other, I think, is the important part is the name change. What does the name Jacob mean?
Deceiver.
Deceiver. The literal answer is he who grasps the heel.
Yeah.
But that means somebody who is deceptive. Why? Because when you wrestle, when you fought in the ancient Near East, fighting was supposed to be just straightforward. If Scott and I were going to go at it, we're just supposed to go straight at it. They just, we're going to fight, if we're going to wrestle and grapple, we're just going to, throw. Being tricky and sneaky was considered dishonorable. And so you didn't do that. and grasping the heel, reaching around behind somebody and grabbing the back of their foot, and yanking their foot out from underneath them, while all of us are, hey, look, all's fair in love and war. Especially if you fight somebody bigger than you. You do what you got to do. While we would say that, they would have said that's bad. And so Jacob means deceiver. It's a dishonorable name that actually comes from wrestling. Okay? And now he's wrestling with an angel.
Okay.
So what's he tried to do to the angel he's wrestled with? Probably. He probably tried to trick him, thus resulting in the hip slap, the first real tap out. Whack, we're out. And he tells him, okay, that'll no longer be your name. You will now be known as Israel. What's Israel mean?
Walk crooked.
Walk crooked? Close, but not quite.
Father of nations? No, that was Abraham, wasn't it?
That's Abraham. Prince of God. El being God. Okay? El Shaddai, El Elyon, Elohim. All of those L's. When you see an L ending, it's God. So when you see people in Scripture in the Old Testament with L endings on their name, that's probably God. When you see Yah, and Jah or Yah, that's Yahweh. That's God by name. And when you see El, that's God. Okay? As a name ending. So Michael is another word for Prince of God. Hang on, Israel's. If Michael Prince of God is Israel, right? I got to do some of this from memory, y'all. Sometimes I have trouble. Israel also sounds like he struggled with God and can also mean the face of God. So the big thing here is the name change, which is supposed to reflect a character change. Jacob, as you go to meet with Esau, don't be the deceiver. Be somebody who has wrestled with and carries the face of God. Realize that you're acting as a prince of God. Realize that God is on your side of this. You don't have to be the sneaky person. But that passage, Exodus 4, at the end of Exodus 4, where Moses and Zipporah are on their way back to Egypt, and the angel of the Lord meets them and is going to put Moses to death because he hasn't circumcised his son. There's some spots in the Old Testament that you just go, okay, that happened. And this is one of them. What's this really mean? And actually, I have a friend who's writing her dissertation in the Old Testament on this. And she's like 180 pages in. And if you ask her, what does it mean? She'll look at you and go, I don't know. I'm 180 pages in. And I still don't have an answer. Which, that's just kind of the way it goes. Because when you do that, it's not just that you don't have an answer. It's that you have to track the whole history. What did they say? What did the Jews say it meant in the time of David? Well, what did they say it meant in the time of Nehemiah? What did they say it meant in the time of the Maccabees? What did they say it meant at the time of Jesus? What's the early church say it means? What do the Jews who live, what do the Jews that lived that way say it mean versus the Jews that went this way? Because when you come after the Roman times, after the Romans drive the Jews out of Israel in 135 AD, some of the Jewish people go west and settle in Europe. Some of them go north into Russia, what's now Russia. It wasn't Russia at the time. Okay, it was still cold. There were still bears, but it wasn't called Russia. And others went east, India and beyond. And still others went south into Egypt and down into Africa. And so as they've spread out in all those different directions, they start to view things a little differently, and it's kind of based on other people they encounter and other things they see and other things that they get in touch with. It's like the difference between us as Southern Baptists in the southern part of America. There are Northern Baptists in the United States, and they think differently about some things than we do. Okay? We got a church covenant, and I gotta find a good place to get it hung back up on the wall. But it's been a long-standing principle in Southern Baptist life that you can have tea, you can have unsweet tea, you can have lemonade, you can have coffee, you can have Coke, but you cannot crack open a beer at church fellowship. We do not believe in the consumption. Generally speaking, we as Baptists as Southern Baptists, hold that there should be no consumption of alcoholic beverages. Okay? We have held that since about 1875. That has been a strong belief of ours for that length of time, for all that time. But if you go to Northern Baptists, they don't hold that same opinion. If you go to European Baptists, they will hold a different opinion. I had a professor in college who talked about how fascinating it was to be at a thing, at a gathering, an international gathering of Baptists, and to see a German Baptist sipping on a beer, angry at an American Baptist who was standing there puffing on a cigarette, and both of them mad at each other for their terrible health habits. The American Baptist having no qualms at all about smoking a pack and a half a day, but absolutely incensed that the German is knocking down a beer with his lunch, and the German Baptist having no trouble knocking down, a beer with his lunch, and a beer with his supper, and a beer in between the two, and a beer later on that night, but absolutely incensed at the idea of firing a cigarette. At all. So geography does affect how we respond to certain things. Because our culture affects it, and what we think about things develops as we go. But yeah, so the Jews, as they spread out. So when you talk about somebody writing 180 pages and still going, well, I'm not sure yet what the answer is, it's because what they're doing is they also have to track. She has to track how everybody whose information she can find has ever answered that question before. What's going on in Genesis chapter 33? She has to translate it herself. She has to deal with all the different textual changes in it, just deal with all those things and answer that question. What has anybody said about this ever? What's the difference in the Hebrew version and the Aramaic version? What's the, all that.
Brother Doug, you said something about the angel being big or something like that. But they were often mistaken for just regular people.
Well, by big, just mighty or stronger, not necessarily, definitely, bigger or overgrown. But the other thing that you had is you did have a difference. We're often mistaken for people. Realize that angels, when they go to looking like people, don't necessarily look like angels. So they can kind of choose to blend or choose not to blend.
Yeah.
Is a part of what's going on there. So. But to answer the question, to give you a short answer, I don't really know what's going on with Jacob wrestling with God or with Jacob wrestling with the angel. I think the main point of the passage is the name change and the realizing that you got to deal with Esau straightforward and in a godly manner. You can't deal with him the way you dealt with Laban. You can't deal with him the way you dealt with your mom and daddy. You can't deal with him the way you dealt with him before. You can't deal with him the way you've dealt with your 4 wives, which you shouldn't have but one of, but you got 4. You're not supposed to have 4 wives.
Well, he got a tree.
One. Yeah, on one of them. The other 2 he picked up because he, anyway. Yeah, he got tricked on one of them, but even then, I still, you still got to got to try to figure out what's going on there where, you know, do you got no candles in the tent at all? I mean, how silent is Leah the night of the wedding? And it's like, you know,
Yeah.
if she must not have said I do, and if she didn't say I do, it doesn't count.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you had some of that grape.
he had too much grape. He was not a Levite. He was never a Levite. And you want to talk about somebody who had a crappy day? Jacob at the wedding.
No.
Although Leah's had to have been worse. I mean, let's put ourselves in put yourself in Leah's shoes for a minute.
Oh.
Here, Dad basically looks at her and says, "You're never going to find a husband. I got to get rid of you somehow. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go and you're going to stand in for your sister, and you're going to take her place and take the husband that she's been waiting on for 7 years. And you're going to have it, and he's going to be your husband, and you're just going to have to deal with that." And I mean, that is just wrong. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. It's just wrong to have treated her that way. But, you know, she's got to be, you know, there are several places in Scripture where we look at some of the women and just go, that's just wrong to be treated that way. And that's actually why Ruth kind of stands out, because we actually see better behavior. And it makes Ruth stand out a little bit. So anyway, all right, any other questions?
Well, you brought up something that I've been wondering for a long time when you said about Jews, north and south, and east and west. Why do people, even in the United States, why do they dislike or even hate the Jews? What's the problem there?
Okay, why do people hate the Jews? Well, and I mean, if people hate the Jews bad enough, it gets its own name. It's called anti-Semitism. Noah's got 3 kids. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And of Shem's descendants, you get the Israelites, and thus you get the Jews, and so that's Semites. So anti-Semitism is hating the Jews. Why do people hate the Jews? And this is one of those spots where you go, I don't understand it, but it's very real. You know, you can find it in, you know, you can tragically find it in American history.
Right.
In you know, right now, but even governmentally, you know, in our lifetimes, there have been, you know, and in English history, you know, you're into the early 1900s before it's legal for a Jew to hold a political office in the United Kingdom. The early 1900s in the United States, there was an organization who wore white sheets and hoods, said that they stood against 3 things that start with K, and all of them are well, they just misspelled Catholic, but the other 2, one's an offensive name for African American, for black skinned folks, and the other's an offensive name for Jews. And they all started with K. Okay? You know, that type of thing went on. So why do people hate the Jews? Partly, in all honesty, partly because, you know, I think that the Jewish people, you know, they're God's chosen people. And so people hate them because they don't like God. I think that's a part of it. Now, on a more practical level, where does it come from? One of the things is that Judaism, as a religion and as an ethnic group, yes, they moved out, you know, they moved up here and over here and over there and down there. Because you can't go straight, you couldn't go straight west because there's an ocean in the way. You had to go up and over. But what happened when they moved is that they tended to live together and to stay together, because it's a whole lot easier to eat kosher and honor God's law and fulfill what the rabbis are teaching you if all your neighbors are also doing this. It's just much simpler. It's much easier to keep Sabbath that way. And so they lived together. And in the process, there are certain points in history that we're able to see that Jewish people living together and following God's law have some things turn out better for them than what was going on. Europe is a prime example of this. In Western Europe, from the 1300s to the 1500s, there were a series of things that we like to call the Black Death, or just simply the plague. Killed somewhere around a third of the population of Europe. Except as far as we can tell, the fatality rate among the Jews is much, much lower. Why? Well, unfortunately, the church, Christian people, have not always, when we've studied Scripture, we haven't always come away from it and taken from Scripture the truths that we should take from it. There have been times that people have read things like where Jesus tells Peter that y'all are clean. Well, he's at the Last Supper. Now, he means spiritually. Okay? So wash your hands. Well, how many other ways to say it? Wash your hands. Guess what? 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century in medieval Europe, cleanliness, and we all grew up with this, it's not in the Bible, but we grew up with it as a truism. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? How many of y'all heard that? You've heard that? It's not in the Bible, but it's true. Okay, cleanliness is valuable. And we understand that. 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century, cleanliness was not held to be a virtue, such that people didn't keep clean. They didn't keep themselves clean. They didn't keep the streets clean. Cats were thought to be demonic creatures, which might still be true, but cats do this really handy thing when it comes to rats and mice. Cats like to play with rats and mice, and then when it's all said and done, the cat is there and the rat is dead. Okay? Christian people in general declined, they didn't want cats around. They thought they were witches in disguise. Witches, because there are no cats mentioned in the Bible except for lions. That's the closest we can come to a reason why they would come up with that type of thing. So the Jews, not bothered by cats. How's the plague spread? Flea bites, fleas that are hitching rides on rats. So don't blame the rats, blame the fleas. The rat's okay. But it's the fleas. It's the fleas on the rats. There's no rats in the Jewish part of town. Christian part of town, 1 in every 3 people are dying. And by 1 in every 3 people, it's not that if there's a household of 3 here, 1 of them's dead, 2 of them live. It's that this whole household is dead, this whole household is dead. This whole street is dead, that street over there, type of thing is going on. But if you don't understand that illness gets spread by these little thingies that can blow in the wind or get spread by mosquito bite, and you think you're looking for a supernatural explanation for everything, all of us Christians are sick and dying. None of them Jews are sick and dying. They must have been making us sick. The other thing that happened is this. Jews being, so you got that. Superstition leads to that. And that builds into hatred. The other thing that happens is this. Most of the Christians were serfs, peasants on the land. Lords, masters were wealthy, and everybody else was dirt poor because literally they lived in the dirt. I mean, it just was where it was. The Jews tended to not be accepted into those setups, and so they lived in their own villages, did their own farming, made their own money. but they weren't accepted as warriors when this Christian prince was convinced that God had commanded that he go out and kill this Christian prince over here. Neither one of them wanted a Jew in their army because they didn't find them trustworthy, and they didn't believe because they wouldn't want to be baptized by the priests and all that kind of thing before they went. So what would they do? They'd borrow money from the Jews to pay for their army to go fight. So now the Jews are making money over everybody fighting each other. Well, it's not a far skip for people to start going, maybe they're trying to pick these fights so they can make money, which they weren't. But you can see, that's where it starts to pick up. And when you compound that over time, they make for convenient people to blame because they're different and they stand out. It's the same thing that always powers racism. The easiest group of people to blame are the people that you can identify. Them. They look different, they talk different, they behave different. It must be their fault. And so it's real easy to do that. And then when that builds up over the centuries, it becomes, it ends up a very strong thing. And then you end up with at various points in history where, because this group of people didn't want the Jews with them and this group didn't want them here, the Jews end up living peacefully while these groups of people are fighting and killing each other. And so then who comes in and says, hey, y'all need to stop fighting? Well, the Jews do. Or who sits down, who finally gets the two princes to sit down and stop having people kill each other off? Oh, the Jews interfered in our stuff. And so then that builds up. But like I said, it becomes we can just force them out. Spain does that in 1492. Most of us remember 1492 as Columbus sailing. The other thing that happens in 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella ban Jews and Muslims entirely from the country of Spain. Throw them all out. Because they're trying to purify the country to only a Catholic Christian country. And they throw them all out. Because they're not us, they're them. And anytime we hit the you're not us, you're them, and start to see people that way, we really develop, that develops into problems. That's why, at the end of World War I, the Germans were trying to figure out why they lost a war when they were a better army. And the blame got put on, well, we ran out of money because the Jews wouldn't loan us any more money. And then you get Hitler pointing out and see all these Jews, see those problems, see those people causing problems. When it really has no accuracy. But what becomes is once somebody is a them, the first thing that we are willing to believe is the worst thing about the them, no matter what evidence we get. And let's just swing straight at you with this one. There's some thems in American politics for us that we would believe anything negative or bad about them, no matter how far-fetched it is. You could tell me, you could make up almost anything bad and mean about Nancy Pelosi, and I'd probably believe it first because she's them. Whereas somebody that's on my side, I'll cast out all the evidence. You really got to try to persuade me that the guy that's on my side, that there's something wrong with it. But somebody that's a them, this is why we ended up, for example, right after Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, a guy went into a pizza joint in Washington, D.C. and shot it up, claiming he was there to deliver victims of child sex trafficking who were being smuggled out of the country by this secret group of people headed by Hillary Clinton. Because Hillary was so wicked and so much of them that this idea that this pizza joint was the front for a child sex trafficking ring was totally believable to this guy. And to this day, there are people that are convinced that he should be found innocent because he did the right thing, he just hit the pizza joint at the wrong time. People still believe it to be true because that's them. And that themness works us into a frenzy and works us into hating people without anything valid. Does that mean that these folks don't ever do well? No, there's lots of things that get done wrong by them. There's also lots of things that get done wrong by us. Okay? But when we're ready to believe, well, I don't know if this is true or not, and I've seen it on Facebook, I don't know if this is true or not, but it sure sounds like something they would do. Anytime you're going to lead a post about a politician or Hollywood or anybody else with, I don't know if this is true or not, stop yourself and don't share it. Just hit delete. If you know it's true, then think about whether or not it's helpful to share it. But if you're going, well, I don't know if it's true or not, just don't bother. Because that takes that themness. And we try to capitalize on that. And that's unhealthy and it's dangerous and destructive. But that's what the Jews are the ultimate them that you can blame on because they look different, they talk different, they speak a different language, they worship differently, they dress differently until you get to the 21st century, where they start, or some of the Jews, the non-Orthodox Jews, start dressing like most of the people around them, but otherwise, you got the black hat, all that, they look different. And this connects over to Ruth. Some of y'all are going, wait, seriously? Yes, seriously, this connects to Ruth. The story of Ruth opens. There's a famine in the city of Bethlehem. Ruth, her husband, 2 sons leave. They go to Moab. Moab was them to the Israelites. Moab was bad. Those were wicked people. Those were evil people. Those were bad people. And Scripture supports this. Okay? They find wives for their sons. But then Ruth's husband dies. Not Ruth's. Naomi's husband died. Naomi's the woman at the beginning. Her husband dies. Her 2 sons die. She's left with 2 daughters-in-law. Ruth and Orpah. The story focuses on Ruth. Orpah makes her way to Chicago and starts a television show. Anyway, and then Ruth and Naomi go back to Israel. They hear the famine is over. Orpah decides to go back and to remain in the land of the Moabites. The people of Israel, the people of Bethlehem, then have to make a choice. Naomi, by having left when times got bad, chose to leave. She left. When the going gets tough, we dig in and fight and make this happen together, right? No, what Naomi did was she and her sons, her and Elimelech, packed up the kids and left town. Now she's back. She hasn't brought back her husband, and she hasn't brought back her sons. She's brought back one of them women in Ruth. But throughout the whole of the story, we see that Ruth is a woman of integrity, and she is a woman who, upon finding Naomi, finds the one true God. And in Ruth, and in the whole of the book of Ruth, we see the outsider show people what it really is to follow God, to be virtuous, to be righteous. She's got everything going against her. She's a foreigner, she's a widow, she's a childless widow, which means that either her husband died real quick or she seemed possibly faulty and unable to provide you with heirs and offspring. Okay? Lots of reasons to not like Ruth. if you're a citizen of Bethlehem and you're an Israeli. Lots of reasons. But the people of Bethlehem have to look beyond that and instead see in Ruth somebody made in the image of God. Somebody who's not them, but is a person. Naomi's daughter, who's come back and said, actually, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, which means bitterness. Okay? Yeah. She'd come back and she's jaded, she's bitter. She wants to be called Mara. But then by the end of the story, she's back to being Naomi. She's not as bitter anymore. Ruth comes, she does, and she becomes acceptable. She becomes so acceptable that in the genealogy of Jesus in the New Testament, there are 4 women, and Ruth is one of them. In fact, of the women in the genealogy of Jesus, 2 of them are definitely foreigners, and a 3rd one probably is. 4 of them are named. 2 of them are definitely foreign women. One of them's probably the third one is probably a foreign woman, and then the 4th one is Tamar. And so, but there's a lot going on there. All 4 of them have sketchy details. But so it's just kind of important to see this, that this is what God does, is He calls on us to look past that them block that we tend to put up. Them. Methodists. Them missionary Baptists. Them Catholics. Them black folk. Them folks that show up at Walmart and don't even speak English. Them folks that make it so that when I call the bank, I have to oprima dos for Inglés. Or no, I have to just wait and not oprima dos. I learned what push is by calling the bank. Those folks that are that way. Them folks in them big cities that want to take our guns away. Them. I know I eventually hit one that gets somebody to go, wait a minute. Them.
You did it.
Them.
Why do you keep wanting this direction?
Because I'm looking at those folks, so I figure I'd point at you. Them. When we grew up, we grew up, them was the Soviet Union. Them communists. Them are still, a lot of them is still communist. I mean, that's still the problem. After 9/11, them the Muslims. Them. But we'll never share the gospel with them. We have to get to know people and choose to share the love of God with people, because they're not them. They're people made in the image of God. They're as valuable to God as Ruth was. As valuable as Naomi. As valuable as Rahab. As valuable as Bathsheba. As valuable as anybody else in God's creation. You be careful not to ever shove anybody into the them category, and not let those people, let them be real people, just like you are. One of the polarizing facts in politics these days and in American culture is that to about 30% of the population, we're a them for being Christian people who want to follow God. We're a them for believing in freedom and liberty. We're a them for what we believe in. And it doesn't feel good to be them. It's not making anybody else them. That being said, let's bring this back around to where we started. When the book of Ruth starts, what kind of a man is Boaz?
When he starts?
When the book starts, he's a single guy. He's run his fields. When we first meet him in the story, what kind of a man is Boaz?
Well, he's got to be thoughtful because he's leaving the land, the rock to be clean, so, Ruth and Ruth can pick it up.
Ruthless.
Oh, my
Ruthless. He's ruthless.
That's true.
Hey, did you know he's gonna do that?
Oh, yeah, that's not three of us cracking up.
All right.
Why don't you tell us then?
I want to see your reaction.
Yeah, I was gonna say, leave her out.